All right, everybody, how's it going? It is Friday, December 9th, 2022, and we just have a little bit of information to go over here today regarding the playoff scenarios for Week 14. As always, this time of year, you start seeing more and more teams, get an opportunity to clinch playoff spots or win their division or just something like that, punch their ticket into the playoffs, if you will. This year, it's been a little bit slower because there's so many teams that are qualifying for those 7, 6, and 5 spots in either the AFC or the NFC. So we're seeing a lot of really tight, close races that might come down to the last week of the season. But of course, you always see the overachieving teams like the Chiefs with 9 wins, the Vikings with 10, the elite Eagles with 11. The better teams are going to have opportunities to clinch divisions or just kind of clinch a playoff spot and take a little bit of stress off themselves. Even in a season where everything feels really close and in the middle close anyway, like it is this year. So, for example, the Lions, they're 5-7, as you see here on the screen. They're 2 games out of a playoff spot. So it's one of them seasons where 5-7 and 7, it's that close. So, all right, let's look at who can clinch a playoff spot for Week 14. Though we have a couple situations. Finally, the AFC has their first scenario this year. Last week they didn't have one. So. Here we are. We have the Kansas City Chiefs who take out the Denver Broncos, so good chance for them to get a win this week. So they can clinch the AFC West. What everybody thought was going to be the hardest division in football this year, the trickiest one to figure out, it turns out it might be one of the first divisions clinched all season. That is quite ironic to what everybody thought would happen this year. Well, with the Broncos and Raiders and the Chargers all kind of playing really crummily this year and the Chiefs just doing their thing, that's pretty shocking. So if Kansas City can go ahead and beat the Broncos and the Chargers lose their game, they go ahead and clinch the AFC West. The Chargers do actually have a tough game ahead of themselves with the Miami Dolphins being their team they have to play. I think it's in Miami too. Let me go double check. It might be in Los Angeles. Okay, it's in Los Angeles. So they have a little bit of an edge there, but boy, oh boy, that's a tough team to have to play against, especially with the defense that's been as inconsistent as the Chargers have been. So good chance for the Kansas City Chiefs to go ahead and take a division title this weekend. All they have to do is beat the Broncos, who have always kind of been this weird tough game for them inside the division. Not necessarily lost, but always a tough game. Probably not this year though. Let's ride. And you got the Chargers who, we'll see if they can beat Miami, who's pretty tough to beat. So good chance for the Chiefs. We'll see what happens. Let's bounce down to the NFC. It's the same 2 teams as last week. It's the Vikings and the Eagles, both with chances to either win a division or clinch a playoff spot. With the Eagles, it's a playoff spot because their division has a couple other teams with 9 wins with the Cowboys. And then, of course, you have the Vikings who can win their division with they win. The Vikings is rather simple. If they beat the Lions, they win the division. If they don't, well, the Lions stay alive and can continue to nip at their heels. Basically, what has to happen is because the Lions have 7 losses and the Vikings are in a situation where if they get to 11 wins, they can't be caught by the Lions, right? Because the worst the Vikings could finish then would be 11-6, and the best the Lions could get to would be 9-8. It creates that kind of weird situation where it's basically as long as Minnesota gets past where they can they can only lose 6 games if they win this, get to the point where you can only lose 6 games and Minnesota gets the division. That's basically how this plays out. So Minnesota wins, they get the division, and they, kind of can coast their way to try and get the number 1 seed in the NFC playoffs overall. Minnesota, of course, Philly's going to be tough to overcome on that. Let's look ahead to the Eagles then. There's a little bit more complicated because there's a few moving pieces. Oh, no, it's not. It's actually as simple as this. If Philadelphia wins or ties, they clinch their playoff spot. So Philadelphia controls their own destiny 100% this week. Win, and you get you're in the playoffs this year. They have to take on the New York Giants, who are 7-4-1. Not going to be an easy game, but always tough with division games. The Giants are a pretty decent team this year. They're playing kind of this recently, but they could get it going. But yeah, so the Eagles just got to beat the Giants. Easier said than done, I would have to say. But hey, it's very possible that they could go ahead and at least clinch a playoff spot. But hey, if they lose, out of nowhere, if they lose the game, kind of like they did to the Commanders, then we would look to the second scenario is if San Francisco loses to Tampa Bay and and Seattle loses to, I just looked at this. I just seen it. Carolina. I thought they already played for some reason. But yeah, so Seattle loses to the Panthers, which, probably won't happen. But So yeah, that's kind of the playoff scenarios. It seems kind of likely that the Eagles at least clinch their playoff spot. The Minnesota could. Really, all three of these things can easily happen this week because it's basically a bunch of like you got to win. One team's got Kansas City doesn't control their own destiny. Minnesota and the Eagles do this week. So all they have to do is win and they're in. So that's kind of a cool concept. But all right, that's pretty much it for week 14. As you can tell, there isn't a lot. I think next week in week 16 is when we're going to start seeing like complicated multi-list scenarios with a bunch of teams that can punch their tickets in, teams that can clinch their division. A bunch of that's going to start happening in the coming weeks, but we're still kind of early toward the end of the season. We're still at the beginning of the end of the season, I would call it. So, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Make sure you leave your thoughts about this down below. I'll be sure to get back to you as soon as I can, like I always do. Do you think any of these teams clinch their spots? Do you think Kansas City wins the division? Does Minnesota? Just a bunch of things we could actually talk about down in the comments, so feel free to leave that down there. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Yeah, that does wrap it up for this. So that's week 14 playoff scenarios in the bag, down the drain. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. Have a great rest of your day, night, morning, mid-afternoon, mid-evening, mid-morning, that time between like 2 and 4 when it's not quite like afternoon, but it's not quite evening. Midday, I guess. But either way, whenever time you listen to this, I hope you have a good rest of that time. Thank you so much for listening. Go Lions, go Tigers, and of course, it's always go Patriots. Let's see, week 15, what'll happen?